afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of The World Today, where we bring you the latest updates. Today's focus is all about the Portuguese visit the president had done today, as it is a historic visit. And this afternoon, we're joined by Mr. Abdulatif Wahaba, who's going to share his insight on what he thinks. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Let's start with our first news item from Egypt Independent that reads, Portuguese president receives President Sisi at the presidential palace. The news item itself reads, Portuguese President Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa receives President Abdel Fattah Sisi at the president's in Lisbon at 11 a.m. Both presidents will discuss ways to boost bilateral cooperation between both countries, in addition to important issues including fighting terrorism and illegal migration. The two leaders will discuss the latest developments in Mideast relations. The official talks will be followed by a press conference. President Abdel Fattah Sisi arrived Sunday in Portugal's capital city of Lisbon during a three-day official visit. What's the significance of this visit? We know that this is the first in years.
Yeah, of course. As you know that President Abdel Fattah Sisi visited many European countries, and at the same time we have historical relations with Portugal and economic relations at the same time, economic and trade relations. And I think that President Abdel Fattah Sisi during the joint press conference with the Portugal president expressed the importance of increasing cooperations between Egypt and Portugal, and at the same time, as you know, that President Abdel Fattah Sisi illustrated the current situations in Egypt, especially after Egypt took many reform and financial economic reform programs and so on, inviting the foreign investors to invest in Egypt. Especially we have many chances, especially in trade, especially in increasing the naval cooperations between Egypt and Portugal. As you know that President Abdel Fattah Sisi on, I think last year, visited Spain at the same time. This is cooperations between the West and Portugal, Spain, and also in the East with Egypt. The two countries are the key points for the international naval trades and so on.
But one of the main points that they will be discussing is the idea of illegal immigration. Why is this the top of the agenda?
Yeah, of course, as you know that the African, especially the coastal countries, and also the South European countries like Italy, like France, like Greece, like Spain, and so on, suffered from the increasing of immigrations between the south and the north and so on. And as you know, all the European countries, not only Portugal or any other countries, they suffered from the terrorism, because as you know that...
I apologize, we're going to take one of our correspondents who's in Portugal, and she's going to tell us a bit more about it. We're joined on the line right now by Linda Abdulatif, Nile TV's correspondent in Portugal, to tell us about what happened today up until the press conference. Linda, can you hear me?
Well, good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you. I apologize for cutting you off, but could you just tell us a bit of an update about what happened since morning up until the conference?
Well, yes, since the early morning, President Abdel Fattah Sisi started off his official visit to the Portuguese capital, Lisbon, where he started off by heading to the Jerónimos Cathedral, where he was received there by the Portuguese President Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa. And following the welcoming ceremony that took place, President Sisi took a tour at the cathedral, then headed to the Belay Palace, where he was received also there by the Portuguese president. Now there, President Sisi held a joint meeting with the Portuguese president, and this was followed by an extended meeting that included officials or delegations from both countries. Now, following that, indeed, a press conference was held between the two leaders. Now, for his part, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi welcomed the friendly host and the welcome that he got right here in the Portuguese capital, Lisbon, adding that both countries indeed have a friendly and historical relations. Now, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi also said during the press conference that in the past period, Egypt has undergone changes that shaped new hopes of change, democracy, and development. And in that regard, he actually expressed his appreciation towards the position taken by Portugal in the development of the democratic transition in Egypt. Now, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi also added that such a visit is indeed expected to be a quantum leap in the economic relation between both countries, adding that he's very pleased with agreeing on the importance of putting the required framework to implement the projects in the different fields through following the activation of the Joint Committee for Economic Cooperation, which will be holding its first meeting in Egypt soon. Now, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi also, called the Portuguese investors and businessmen to make use of the promising opportunities in the fields of development infrastructure, which actually Portugal excels in, like, for example, transportation, sea freight, and renewable energy, adding that Egypt is implementing a number of mega projects in those fields within the framework of the sustainable development. Now, President al-Sisi also called Portuguese businessmen to make use of the investment incentives that are offered or that are provided by the Egyptian government with the new investment law and within the distinguished opportunities provided by development projects in Egypt. Now,
do you think, Linda, could you just give us a little bit of a brief about what's on the agenda for the president's visit, the three-day visit itself? What meetings are set for the next 2 days, for instance?
Well, let me just tell you that following the press conference that took place, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi headed to the headquarters of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, where he was received by the Portuguese Prime Minister Antonio Costa. Both leaders, or Prime Minister Antonio Costa and President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, held a joint meeting that was followed by an expanded meeting. A couple of minutes from now, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi will be heading to the headquarters of the Mayor of Lisbon, where he will be meeting with him there, and President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi is expected to deliver a speech there. Now, following that, towards the evening, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi will be heading to the Ajuda Palace, where he will be received by the Portuguese president, and both leaders will be delivering speeches as well. Now, the visit of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi tomorrow will include meetings with Portuguese businessmen. He will also visit the Portuguese Parliament. He will also be participating or heading to the Portuguese Military Academy, where he will be giving a speech in a conference that will be held on security and terrorism. And also, he will be heading to a company that specializes in the manufacture of military industry.
Okay, that was Linda Abdulatif, our correspondent from Lisbon, Portugal. Thank you for updating us on the situation there. We'll get back to you later on to find out more about the visit. So, Mr. Abdulatif, she gave us a bit of a brief about what's on the agenda. Let's take the next news item about the visit itself, and then we'll talk about the brief. We go back to the news item from Al Ahram Online that reads, President al-Sisi in Portugal for a 3-day visit. The news item itself reads, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi arrived Sunday in the Portuguese capital of Lisbon for his first official visit to the country following the inauguration of Marcelo de Souza as president in March. On the 3-day visit, President al-Sisi is set to meet with his Portuguese counterpart, the Prime Minister, the Parliament Speaker, in addition to heads of academic, economic and international institutions. The news item itself reads, he will also attend meetings with Portuguese business persons on boosting investment in Egypt. Several Portuguese companies have shown interest in taking advantage of investment opportunities available in the Egyptian market, especially after the latest economic measures adopted by the country, mainly the liberalization of a local currency exchange. Linda also spoke about the idea or the fact that the president has an economic attaché with him as well to discuss investments. What kind of investments could we expect from Portugal?
Of course, let us say that first, he's trying to give them a significant mission that Egypt restored its position in the area, restored its security at the same time, and the current political situation is completely different than before 2013. As you know that any try to attract foreign investment, you have to convince them with stability and the security at the first time. And as you know that on the other hand, he offered for them all the opportunities in Egypt and the potentiality in many other aspects like the renewed power and the untraditional powers in Egypt, how to invest in it, and at the same time the cooperations in naval aspect. This is a very important aspect and important for the cooperations between the two countries. This is the first. Yes. And at the same time, Egypt offered many mega projects for the foreign Arab and the Egyptian investors at the same time. We changed all the climates completely, especially after the currency flotations, after increasing...
Why is this encouraging investors, though?
Yeah, of course, because all the foreign investors were waiting this step, because you have an exchange rate or the official exchange rate. The Egyptian banks, for example, it is dollars is about 9 Egyptian pound, but you haven't you have the black markets, and the gap between them is so increasing. Now we have stability in exchange policy in Egypt.
So you think this is an encouraging thing for business?
Yeah, of course. This is, and at the same time, as you know, that Egypt amended the investment law and drafted a new one, and will be passed to the parliament maybe the next week. This, of course, presented many incentives for the Egyptian foreign Arab investors to come to Egypt.
Okay, let's take another news item that's still about the Portuguese visit from the Daily News of Egypt that reads, Sisi stresses on Egypt's respect for human rights in an interview with a Portuguese news agency. The news item itself reads, President Abdel Fattah Sisi said he released all prisoners recommended by the Detained Youth Committee in accordance to Article 155 of the Constitution during his interview with the Portuguese Losoa news agency. The interview comes 2 days before he is set to visit Portugal on an official visit to discuss ways in which Egypt and Portugal can strengthen their economic, political and diplomatic ties. According to Sisi, there was a 37% increase in trade between both countries last year. The president also spoke about internal efforts to combat terrorism, particularly in northern Sinai, saying that the state is keen on upholding the values of democracy, human rights and freedom, whilst also ensuring national security. The idea or the issue of human rights has always been at the top of the agenda of most Western countries. Of course. Do you think that the president's interview and the fact that he released prisoners is reassuring to Western governments and the investors? Yeah,
of course, because this is, of course, an indication for the political situations in Egypt. What happened, especially, as we said before, there is a complete changes in many issues, especially the human rights issues. As you know, that European countries and the foreign countries are very or has a specific points for this point, and at the same time, as you know, that all the economic cooperations between the countries just now, taking into considerations even in current time or in futures the human rights issues, and also as you know, the rights of the employees, for example, and so on, is apart from the human rights issues at the same time.
We're still talking about the same idea from another news item that reads from the World Bulletin, reading, Sisi holds an interview to a Portuguese news agency. The news item itself reads, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi praised U.S. President-elect Donald Trump, said that he expected greater engagement from his administration in an interview with Portuguese media. The former Egyptian army chief had strained relations with outgoing President Barack Obama's administration, which had temporarily suspended military aid after Sisi toppled his elected predecessor. He is quoted as saying, "Personally, I respect and appreciate Trump," Sisi said, according to an English translation of his remarks with the Portuguese news agency published on Saturday. He also adds that I believe that President-elect Trump will be more vigorously engaged in issues of the region. The news item itself may be slightly biased, but regardless of it, why is it important for the Portuguese media to hear what the president thinks of the U.S. administration?
As you know, there is a dramatic changes in the world, especially politically and in international economic issues.
Yes.
As you know that Trump on the first during his run discussed and declared his opinion in many critical issues. But as you know that at the same time, as you know, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, according to the international traditions, welcomed Trump as a president for the United States. So you have to wait to declare your own point of view frankly.
Well, unfortunately, sir, we would have talked more about the issue, but we're running out of time.
Yes.
So, Mr. Abdel Fattah, a journalist, thank you so much for
Thank
joining
you.
us this afternoon. This brings us to the end of this episode of The World Today, but stay tuned for more updates on Nile TV.